This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
And welcome to the morning break. I am your host, Khanh Duc Kuttig. My guest today is Jason Chan, and we're talking about non-native English-speaking teachers in a global world.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another show. Today we have Jason Chan in the studio, and our chat is going to focus on non-native English speaking teachers, and occasionally I'm going to shorten it to nesters and N-E-S-T, and I'm just going to say nesters. But more importantly, we're going to not just talk about non-native speaking teachers in ELT, but we're going to take a more focused look. In particular, we're going to look at hiring and teaching practices in higher ed, and actually what other ELT sectors can learn from us. So, Jason, welcome. Good to have you here in the studio. Say hi first. Hi, say hi.
Hi, can you hear me? Am I
Yes, I
live?
can hear you
Yeah,
really well.
thanks.
Oh, Jason, welcome.
So yeah, thank you. Apologies. Usually my voice does not sound as sexy, but I'm under the I'm a bit under the weather and my throat kind of hurts, so
Oh
that's
no,
why.
oh no.
No,
Okay,
it's
well,
fine.
I hope we can keep this conversation.
Yeah.
Drink plenty of water and, sexy voices. We love sexy voices. Um,
Yeah.
Nevertheless, let's just move on now. So, Jason, you teach English language and you're based at a university in Austria. So let me ask you just
Yes.
really bluntly, how did you get there?
I took the train. I no, I well, it took a while. It's been a 20-year journey
Mm-hmm.
since I started teaching. So should I give you a little bit of background?
Yeah, go for it. I'd like
All
to
right.
know because so just for those listening in, it's actually quite interesting because when Jason and I were first talking about, Jason coming onto the show, I remember Jason was saying you said you and I something about we're similar, like we have the same trajectory, the same background, being
Yes.
non-native speakers, and then I said, well, but I'm a native speaker. And
Mm,
that's where I and here this is why now I want to hear from you, and then we can share a little.
sure.
So see, Jason
You
Chan
said
isn't
you
John Smith,
you
and
said you
I'm not.
cheated.
I know
You
I
said you
cheated.
cheated.
I cheated.
Yeah. I mean,
Looking.
in a way, I also did. But let's. So at the moment, I've been working. I mean, I've been working since January in Innsbruck, Austria, at
Mm-hmm.
MCI, Management Center Innsbruck. Is a University of Applied Sciences,
Right.
where I am an assistant professor of English language and business communication. And
Mm-hmm.
before that, I spent a year in Asia, teaching at different institutions. And before that, I spent most of my time in Germany, where I essentially did temporary contracts. And, I think you've talked about this before, how the system works in Germany.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
At universities, private institutions, at companies, and so on. I
Mm-hmm.
started about 20 years ago in Hong Kong. I was there uh, trying to find my route, so to speak.
Right.
And I just kind of ended up teaching English. Well, to teach is quote unquote not really the word, because I actually essentially just help people practice their own English. I had no qualifications back then,
Right.
nothing.
Right.
I just needed to make money. I mean, this story is not um, new to a lot of people who are
Mm-hmm.
in our field of work, I think. So the reason why I say I also cheated like you, because I actually grew up in Toronto. where I went to school. Yeah, am I a native? Am I not? That's a question I think about very often, and
Right.
I thought for a long time about this when I was doing my doctoral dissertation at the University of Glasgow. I
Mm-hmm.
actually wrote my doctoral dissertation on this.
Oh, how cool.
Um, yeah, I mean
I'm gonna
it's
go dig it up.
online.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go and look for it. That's
yeah.
really interesting.
So it's called the Journey to the West: Acknowledging Intersectionality and Autoethnographic Study of a Chinese English Teacher's Career from
Oh,
Hong
how
Kong to
cool.
Germany. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I like that you used the title from the Monkey King. That's so cool.
oh, that's very good that you noticed. That was the idea. I mean, like we're talking about a very long journey. So
Yeah, yeah,
from the east to the west, you know.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that's how, I mean, and to answer your question previously, how did I get here? Um, well, I made sure that they couldn't say no to me by just studying everything I can do, like doing everything I can do to make sure that I'm more qualified than the next person, to the person who looks more native than me.
Right,
That's,
right.
yeah.
I think I don't know if it's fair to say this, but um, in this whole linguistic imperialist world or the past linguistic imperialist world, looks play a role. You know,
Oh, definitely.
I remember as you were sharing your story from you took your journey to the east, I took my journey to the west, and I moved. You know, after I finished compulsory education, I moved to Germany, looking for my roots, and also because having grown up in Singapore, but never having permanent resident status and things like that, or and you know any of the benefits of citizenship in Singapore. I am by nationality a German through my dad. Education, higher education was not an option for me, so I thought, well, I'll go to Germany and see what what the home country, what the Vaterland
What the
has,
fuss is about.
what the fuss is about, what the Vaterland has to offer anyway.
Mm,
And I remember, like you, I went into teaching also without any qualifications, and
mm,
I hope our listeners and people who know me personally and are listening in. I hope you know I've not lost any credibility. But mind you, that was also 20 years ago.
mm.
So I was hired by Berlitz. So I saw this sign. I was at
Oh
university as a
no.
student. Hey, come on! If it had not been for Berlitz, I would not be here today. I have to give them
Sure,
that credit.
sure.
Okay, so I was at university in Germany and I saw a sign and they were looking at the time. And you have to remember at the time, 20 years ago,
Mm.
it was perfectly normal. It was perfectly okay to hang up a sign advertising for native English speaking speakers to teach English. Just as,
Well, I
just
hate to
as
say
at
this,
the
but
time, it
nowadays
was
it's
also
still
perfect.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it depends on where you are, right? Because if
Mm,
you're in Europe, that is a no-go. I mean, there will still be, institutions and employers or businesses who will try it, but definitely in higher ed and institutions of further education, you can't advertise for a job. You can sift people through, and whatever you do behind closed doors, you can end up, picking the person that you think is the native speaker. So anyway, so I applied for this job at Berlitz and I got it. Now, what was really interesting was that I had a friend who is Malaysian Chinese. So she's ethnically Chinese, but she's a Malaysian, citizen. And unlike me, people do say I look white. So when I was growing up in Singapore, people always say, people see the whiteness in me. When I go walk around here, people see the Asian in me. Different
mhm.
story for different day. But my friend, she was, if you looked at her, you would not think that she was a native speaker. So she applied. She felt that she was a native speaker, and she was too because she grew up in Singapore, she also went through education in English. She did British O levels. She
Hmm.
went for this job at in Lingua, and they did not take her, and they said, no, we only want native speakers. And it was on the
Mm,
basis of her name. I mean, my name's not very native speakery either. And you know, yet because I had the look, I got the job.
mm.
And what I wanted to ask you is, if we're looking back, if we're reflecting on the last 20 years from when you began teaching, how often do you actually get asked questions along the lines of, are you a native speaker?
Oh,
Do you still get asked
I
that? Do you see that there's been a shift?
I think the last time I was asked this was just a few years ago, actually, before I went to Asia. Yeah, I
Mm.
had a job interview where the person asked me why I am Canadian. Yeah, yeah,
Oh
I
my.
remember this. Yeah, and I was a bit, no, I think she prefaced it by asking, "Can I ask you a personal question?" And, I said yes. And then they asked why I am Canadian. And I said, well, because, I have Canadian citizenship. I
Mm.
didn't know where they were taking this. And then
Right.
it turns out they were trying to get to the bottom of my Canadianness, I
Mm.
suppose. And yeah, I think that was only a few years ago, actually. I mean, and
Wow.
before that, I get this all the time. And people ask when I immigrated to Canada and if that would then make me a native speaker or not.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And
But
I just think
yeah.
it's crazy that there are people in this global world that are still, so obsessed with that. Um, I remember when I first started teaching. Interestingly, when I was teaching for Berlitz, and then after that, I worked for other language schools. They didn't so
Mm.
much question my nativeness. I think they were just happy to have a cute little girl come in and teach English. No, just kidding.
For
Um,
for next to nothing.
for next to nothing. Yeah, but um, I s- I was never really questioned. I mean, people do ask like, where you from, and that's always difficult for me. That's difficult because neither of my parents are native English speakers. And then I grew up in Singapore, and
Mm.
people don't always know that in Singapore, English is the medium of education. So they kind of go, "Oh, really? So you speak Chinese?" And I'm like, "No." And they go, "You don't?" And I'm like, "No." "So what do you speak?" And I go, "I speak English." Um, so I didn't get that so much when I was in industry, when I was teaching English in industry, because I used my charm. At university, then after teaching a couple of years in industry, I taught at my local university language center, and then after that, I got an almost permanent job in the English department at a university. And I was asked a lot, not so much by colleagues, because I mean, they hired me, but by students. And I thought that was really bizarre. At the time, I thought it was really bizarre. They go, and are you an English speaking teacher? No, they go, "Miss, are you a native English speaker? Miss, what variety of English do you speak?" And I didn't know. Well, to the first question, yeah, I am a native English speaker, and but I was so young and I was so oblivious. I had no idea what
Mm.
what what their issue was, you know. And
Yeah.
it to be fair, it's
No, I
only
mean, I've had similar experiences as well. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I remember
Um,
when I was in school. Sorry to interrupt. When I was in school, growing up in Singapore, we had and there is this trend and this program still on around the world. I remember when I was in Austria and in Germany, in the early 2000s, there are all these au pair programs, right? Families
yes.
get young people from native English speaking countries or French or wherever, whatever language they want to introduce at home. And schools had teaching assistants who are native speakers of the language. When I was in school, in secondary school and junior college in Singapore, we had that too. And that was in the 80s. I remember we had Mr. Connor and Mr. Webster and Mr. Fahy. And I never ever thought of them as, oh, they're the native English speaking teachers come here to
mm,
teach us good English. I mean, so because I had been exposed to that, multicultural, I'm going to just call it a multicultural landscape of teachers, I really couldn't grasp why my own students were so obsessed with whether I was a native speaker or not. And then later I learned that many of them had in their own schools teaching assistants who were native English speakers.
mm.
Yeah. Oh no, that's kind of killed the conversation, hasn't it?
I think no. I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think first of all, I do consider this dichotomy of native and non-native to be. I mean, I consider these terms to be really kind of dirty words
Mm-hmm.
because and a lot of the things I say now actually is just in my writing. Because the thing is, when you look at nature, um, what usually is considered non-native are the invasive species, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you don't belong. It's actually it kind of has this connotation of you don't belong in here. You don't belong
Mm-hmm.
in this circle. That's why you're non-native, right? So, I really try not to use those terms, but however, there aren't other terms which could define what it means to be non-native and native as succinctly as these terms. Like I think people come up with stuff like teachers or like native level teachers,
You're right.
or yeah. So I think a lot of these terms are being used now. The other thing which I wanted to say is I think there is a reason why people are so obsessed whether or not someone is quote unquote native, right? Especially in Europe, is because for a long time there hasn't been any standard in terms of qualifications.
Right.
Um, right. So the only thing that you can use to benchmark how good a person's English is whether or not they spend the majority of their lives in an English-speaking country, right? And which is not, as we know, necessarily the right benchmark to use because of such things like backpackerism. I mean, after COVID, it's reduced, but there's still a lot of people who go to Asia who
Yeah.
just wants to spend a year abroad or whatever, and they have no business doing this, right? So that's why I
Mm.
think the whole profession is, uh, how should I put this? Whole profession
The
is not legitimized
right.
because of the lack of standard in terms of qualifications.
Right. The professionalism of the profession is questioned. The validity of, English language teachers outside of compulsory education is put into
Exactly.
question. Mm.
Yeah. So that's why I think, and if you're a student, you're a parent, you don't know what's behind the scene. You don't know what qualifications there are. So that's, the first thing you look at is, does this person have, let's, call it what it is, does this person have a white face,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So I think the lack of transparency enables this obsession um, with being a quote unquote native speaker,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Um, but I honestly don't want to. I mean, there's so much writing, there's so much literature on, the unequal, uh, justified treatment of non-native English speaking teachers.
yeah.
I think, and I think we also talked about this, like when we were talking about what we would talk about today, is it
Mm.
should be a little bit more positive because and this is when you told me you kind of cheated, because I said like, well, you and I are doing okay, all right?
Yeah,
We have
yeah.
jobs which a lot of people would like to have in our field of work.
Mm.
So, it's not all bad. I mean, like when you look around in different parts of the world in departments, English departments, a lot of people who are profs are or head of departments are not white.
Yeah, yeah,
So I don't think it's, all bad. Which, it just goes back to what you asked me, like, how did I get there? You have to kind of improve your standing
yeah, yeah. And
by
part of it
doing more.
is the sector, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's endemic of the sector. If you, let's say, if you're a science teacher,
Mm,
right? So no, let's start at the beginning. So you finish high school and you go into teacher education. You've decided, okay, I'm going to be a teacher of biology and computer science, and you train for that, and you go into your school, and nobody's going to question whether, you know, you've been playing computer games since you were a child, or whether you'd already, dissected your first
mm,
insect at the age of 4. Nobody's going to question that. They look at your
mm,
qualifications and you're hired, but you're hired only there. Maybe later on, you go up the career ladder, you become head of year or head of section, and then at some point head of school. But that's your career trajectory. A person who's been trained as a teacher usually tends to stay in education in schools. If they diversify at some point later, they go into publishing or writing or consulting.
mm.
Nobody questions their
Yeah.
personal characteristics, their personal features. They look at qualifications. I think the problem in ELT in our sector is that you can find English language teachers, or put the other way, English language teachers can find employment almost practically anywhere.
Mm,
I have English language teacher friends who work in private schools that cater to the compulsory ed years. I have English language teacher friends who are self-employed, who work in adult education. I have English teacher friends like and me who are in higher ed, and then those who are in private language schools in different parts of the world, in language schools in the UK, and so on. Um, and I think that's the problem. That's the problem with our field, that the sector is so diverse. Like you say, also that there's no one qualification, right? That unifies our job, so to speak, because different schools will accept different qualifications, and not just those professional qualifications, but some accept, some would take only a certificate level, some will want people with a diploma. And I think this is why someone actually once told me that hiring policies are very different in higher ed. They were talking about me and my work and saying, well, you've got it really, really lucky. Hiring policies are different in higher ed, and non-native English speaking teachers tend to face fewer barriers in higher ed. What has
mm.
what do you think about that? Do you agree? What's your experience been?
Um, hmm, that's a good question. I mean, I've had jobs in higher ed and also in the private sector before. I mean, these weird, awkward questions do come up, but at the end, I tend normally I would get the position. So I think ultimately it hasn't been an issue for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the issue with that is like you brought up a really good point in that if you teach biology, nobody's going to say, "Hey, are you a native biologist?" You know, like, are
Yeah.
you are you a native chemist? And you know why though? It is because biology is not seen as owned by
Mm,
a certain group of people, right? Because they
right.
also talk about, as I said, I'm trying to plug my thesis here so people would quote me. But listen, like language is something that people perceive could be owned. Like there's this discussion of ownership of English, right? And
Yeah,
you know, um, there's the three circles model by Cathro,
that's
which
right.
says,
Yeah.
right, like
Inner,
so,
outer,
inter outer. I don't know where Singapore is.
expanding,
Singapore is
outer.
expanding,
No,
inner outer expanding,
Singapore and
outer, I
Hong
think.
Kong are outer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like literally the inner circle controls the language, or so they think, right? And that's
Mm,
why there's this issue with you know who owns the language. And
yeah.
going back to your question about my experience, I think we're in a very interesting situation in Germany where, yes, it is a Western country, but the Germans themselves are not native speakers, right?
Right.
So I feel that has worked. I don't know about your experience, but that has worked in my favor, actually. Um, I've never tried to get a job in Canada where I grew up or the States,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like in Germany, people hiring staff are more open. I mean, there are different things that we have to deal with, like the bureaucracy, and you have to
Yeah.
really fit the cookie cutter this job description, right? But
Right.
like,
Right. Yeah.
I think otherwise, my experience here has been, I don't want to say positive, but um, okay, like I mean, there are other reasons why I'm not getting work in Germany, permanent positions, but these are more bureaucratic than anything
Yeah.
else.
Rumor has it that I got, at the time that I was hired, I got the one last permanent full-time position that was
I
available
think
in
you
Germany.
probably did. I
I
think you
probably
probably
did.
did.
Because no, well, I mean, we had a new colleague join us 2 years ago. I think she got the last one because that she also shared, horrendous stories about moving from contract to contract and being, sidelined when, somebody else got the permanent full-time job. And that's an interesting point. It's a point that you made earlier, Jason. It's about pushing ourselves,
Mm,
um, qualifications are important. And I know I say this from a position of luxury because I also
mm,
know that there are many teachers in the private sector, so not in higher ed, teachers in language schools and elsewhere in the world, who do not have the money to pay for the type of professional development or further training that would
I
help them go
I
up the
have
career ladder.
to
Sorry.
I have to disagree with you here a little bit because, as we both know, higher education in Germany is pretty much free. It costs nothing if you wanted to do your doctorate here in Germany. You just have to find, a supervisor, right?
That's right.
So
Yeah.
I don't see why this would be an issue.
But if you're not
Um,
based in Germany, that's the thing. I'm talking about,
right.
peers of ours who are based in let's say in Italy, um,
Yeah.
elsewhere, who don't have that access. I mean, one could say, right? Well, you've got all these. I have a friend from my teaching association who's doing his master's by online learning through a provider in the UK. It's not cheap, you know. He's they're doing it, by way of micro credentials, and then they write a
Yeah.
dissertation at the end, but it's not cheap. And if you're a language teacher in a language school, or if you're freelance and you're always looking, always having to move, as I said in my last show, from one gig to the next, then you don't
Yeah.
have that stable income. I mean, I'm
Sure.
currently doing my doctorate. Again, like I say, I'm in a position of luxury. I've got a wonderful supervisor in a German university. I pay next to nothing, but I get very, very good, teaching, supervision, and support.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's not something that everybody has. But and to come back before we let this sit for a while, to come back to what I was asking about, whether nesters have fewer barriers in higher ed, and you said there's always that admin. I think higher ed institutions in Europe are also very careful about their job ads, because somebody could, if you threw in the word native English speaker, there's somebody who could go and sue you with the European Council, because wording like that
Mm.
is just not allowed. It's essentially it's illegal. So let's let that sit for a bit.
At AQA, we work with the UK's largest teacher network to shape the future of assessment. With teachers for students, we ask questions today that matter tomorrow.
The 7,500 primary schools are already using Kapow Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to kapowprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Schools Week reports that the union NAHT has advised school leaders to demand a full risk assessment from their employers over what it describes as the very real dangers to staff well-being brought about by the new Ofsted inspection framework. The NAHT says leaders should write to local authorities, academy trusts and governing bodies asking what they will do to protect and support teachers and leaders. NAHT accuses Ofsted of failing to heed an independent wellbeing impact assessment commissioned by the Inspectorate, which found the new report cards will increase stress and workload for school staff. Schools Week says the NAHT has written a template letter for school leaders to use, and a spokesperson said the action was not simply about workload, but about preventing avoidable harm. According to the article published on the 30th of September, at least 2 local authorities have already received letters from leaders. Steve Rollett, Deputy CEO of the Confederation of School Trusts, said it was seeking expert HR and employment advice in response to NAHT's guidance to members. This latest guidance from NAHT further highlights union concerns, and Schools Week also reports the union is considering balloting members for strike action. In TES magazine, comments by Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson are featured as she speaks about the issue of parental engagement. The article reports that Ms. Phillipson has said school leaders should have more training and support on how to communicate with parents effectively. She said that engagement with parents is critical, but stated she had heard from school leaders that training they receive does not always help them learn the best ways to do this. Ms. Phillipson's comments made at the Labour Party's annual conference included saying head teachers should not drift into judgment when interacting with parents or make parents feel talked down to. Further details on these comments, as well as Ms. Phillipson's views on inspection and behaviour, can be found on TES magazine online. The BBC reports on school building collapse in Indonesia. 3 people have been killed and 99 others hospitalised, some with critical injuries. Rescue workers also faced challenges as some pupils of the Kuttig Islamic boarding school in East Java were trapped under rubble after the building gave way. The two-storey building, according to the Disaster Mitigation Agency, had an unstable foundation and could not support the weight of the construction of 2 additional floors. The collapse affected mainly boys who were gathered for prayers. Girls were praying in another part of the building and managed to escape. The school is a traditional Islamic boarding school in Indonesia, but does not fall under the Ministry of Education. Instead, it is monitored by the Ministry of Religious Affairs. Further details can be found on the BBC World News Asia website. FE Week reports comments by PM Keir Starmer saying he has scrapped Labour's target of getting 50% of young adults into higher education and has set a new goal that includes FE and apprenticeships. The government will also pump £800 million extra into 16 to 19 education next year from the existing spending review settlement, including the creation of 14 new technical excellence colleges. The PM spoke at his party's conference and told the audience he will make it a defining mission to no longer ignore further education. He said the target of getting half of young adults into higher education, set by Tony Blair in 1999, is not right for our time. Instead, he said the country should be aiming for 2/3 of young people to get higher level skills, either through university, further education, or gold standard apprenticeships by the age of 25. Starmer singled out the value of further education, stating it has long been seen as the Cinderella sector, but this would no longer be the case in the government's forthcoming white paper. More details in FE Week. Finally, a teacher tap poll reported on by Schools Week suggests that 2/3 of schools do not have a sustainability lead as required by new climate change rules. The Conservative government's climate change strategy, first published in 2022, set out requirements for every school to nominate a sustainability lead from October 2025. But since Labour won power, little has been said about the plan. According to the Teacher Tap poll, only 24% of respondents said they were aware that their school had a sustainability leader, although this is up from 18% 2 years ago. Henry Greenwood from Green Schools Project said he was surprised but not surprised by the poll's findings, saying he often asks teachers and leaders if they know the Department for Education has a climate strategy and sometimes gets no hands up at all. A Department for Education blog published in January said the Labour government's climate strategy was preparing schools for the climate issues we face. Full details on Schools Week. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
And we are back. You're listening to the morning break, and my guest and I, Jason Chan and I, are discussing some of the attitudes that have prevailed amongst towards English teachers, non-English language teachers in different educational contexts. Jason, as we were listening to the news, you what you said earlier about ownership, like there's this perception that English is owned by someone, unlike, the biology teacher who owns biology. When you get hired, people don't go, are you a native biologist or are you related to David Attenborough, right? And I was just thinking about that. So I think in the private sector, or even in, the lower levels of compulsory education, when people are learning English or being taught English, or parents sending their kids to go and learn English, they have a certain perception of what they want, their children to learn. Okay. They see English as English language. And then I was just thinking, as I was mulling that in my head, I was reminded of what you actually said when you introduced yourself, and you said that you're an assistant professor of business communication. And Did you say that? Yeah, right. Business communication, and nobody's
English
ever
language
asked
and
English
yeah.
exactly English language and business communication. Now, nobody's ever asked you if you're a native business communicator, right? Just like
No.
I teach English, right? I'm an instructor at my university, and one of my classes is essay writing and classroom language or classroom communication. And nobody's asked me if I was a native classroom communicator. So,
Yeah.
my question um, is this kind of situation, so the rise, the growth of English medium instruction in universities worldwide, does this shift create more space for non-native English speaking teachers to be seen as
Mm.
legitimate educators?
Hmm.
Because also to get into university, it's not just your certificate and your diploma. Actually, I
Mm.
think the hiring practices may be different. The doors may be open to both nesters and and native speakers, but the hurdles that you have to jump in terms of qualification are higher. What say you?
I think the hiring practices comes down to, I mean, at the end of the day, right? Uh, I think a lot of pro- I have issue with people who identify as non-native and then they're moaning about how they're not getting work
Mm-hmm.
because they're being prejudiced, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
it is really up to you to be the person in charge of your career trajectory, and
Right.
we
Right.
should really start by the language itself. So I like to give this analogy is, well, if there are two people going for the same English job, one, they have the same qualifications, everything is the same, except one is a white person. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If I were a hiring administrator, and that comes down to just that one thing, of course, I would go for the white guy, right? Because it's
That's
like,
going to be a
well,
very unpopular opinion. Okay, go for it.
sure,
Keep going.
but
Yeah.
this is, I think, it's like if I go for pizza, if I don't see the kitchen, if it tastes good, I'm not gonna raise any issues if it's like done by anybody other than an Italian pizza maker, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I'm saying. If your English is not good enough, of course it's going to hinder your trajectory career
Yeah.
wise, right? And
Yeah.
this is an issue, this is a big issue with a lot of people I know who are teaching, who I'm an oral examiner for IELTS, right? And
Yeah.
I meet a lot of people who say they're IELTS teachers, and I'm thinking, well, and then they like to brag how high they score on IELTS,
Mm-hmm.
and when you talk to them, really, they are not in the position to teach people English, you know? And
Right.
I feel this is doing the industry, our work, injustice
Mm-hmm.
by constantly blaming the administrators and the hiring committees of not hiring you because you're non-native. Yeah, you're non-native. I'm non-native. But what is the difference? The difference is at the end of the day, if you're good enough, and they have no reason to not hire you. And also in today's world where everything is so multicultural, I think actually non-native English speaking teachers have an advantage that if the English is good enough, right? They
Yeah.
have other perspectives that they can offer, which somebody who grew up in, Alabama, USA, that cannot, right?
Yeah.
So I think people who hired me saw that, the bar is
Mm.
there. Yes, your English has to be at a certain level, and then they would forget non-native or native, and then they only see, oh, but Dr. Chen, he could also teach intercultural courses. He's lived in 3 continents, and we have to see the benefits of being a non-native English-speaking teacher, right? Whether
Right,
you
right.
see yourself as one or not. But the bottom line is you have to meet certain requirements. It doesn't give you a free pass if you say you're non-native. So, well, my English shouldn't be the same as the next white guy, right?
Right, right.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but I mean, I'm really trying very hard in my conversation with people and in my writing to kind of change the narrative. Is that we are victims of prejudice, which is I don't really believe that is true. And what really I find, and you're right. I mean, I have um, probably this is also going to be a not very popular opinion, is that if somebody who is visibly non-native can quote unquote make it, what
Mm-hmm.
are the excuses for the visibly native person? Why is there so much talk about discrimination? I mean, I do agree that their hiring practices could be improved,
Right, right.
but like what is the reason why they are not being hired for those jobs? I think we have to look within and see what we have done to improve our chances of being hired, right?
Mm.
So yeah, and I think honestly, in today's world, the non-natives have a leg up over the natives because we
Yeah.
have more to offer. This is
I
what I
mean,
really think.
yeah, I agree with you that we have a leg up and that we have more to offer. And actually,
Yeah.
what you've described. So, I know many friends who are teachers who are both native speakers and non-native speakers who are very high flyers. They've written books
Sure.
on teaching. They've got, you know they love their work. They're in good
Hmm.
positions, not to brag or
Yeah.
anything, but when we talk to each other, when I see what they do, um at the risk of sounding a bit cliche, we could say they've made it.
Yeah.
They've made it. And I think what I struggle with, and again, this is going to be possibly unpopular, what I struggle with, teachers, native or non-native alike, who blame, like you say, who blame the system, who feel that it's the system that's against them, and perhaps we should be looking inward. I mean, I can understand for such teachers who say, well, I'm with this small language school, or I run this small language school in this place here, and the parents always ask me, do you have native English speaking teachers? And we only want native English speaking teachers. Yes, I do sympathize with them. I think that conversation has to continue. Like,
Mm.
why is this still being perpetuated? Why are parents and people who are hiring still looking for that? I mean, I
I mean,
don't
especially in
have the
Asia.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have the answers to that. I don't have the answers to that. But if you also look, looking in Asia, a dear friend of mine is an English instructor, English language instructor at one of the universities in Singapore, and she's not a native speaker. She's from Taiwan, right?
Mm.
So again, it comes. I think the question is, where do you want to go in your career? I think very few people actually wake up and say, "Oh, I want to be an English language teacher." I think even before I
Mm.
moved to Germany, English language teaching wasn't even a thing for me. I never thought I it's something I do. Many of my English language teacher friends got into teaching accidentally. They've come to
Yeah.
Europe on an exchange year and stayed, and this is the career
Yeah.
they've found themselves in. Or friends go to other people I know have gone to Spain and got into teaching and are still in teaching. So the question
Yeah.
is, what I see is that if you're going to stay and be in teaching, you want to ask
Yeah.
yourself, where do I go from here, and how do I
Mm.
strengthen my my persona? How do I strengthen myself as an English language teacher and sell
But
myself?
this is a very interesting point. What you pointed out, I think, is there seems to be a divide. You know, there are people who have quote unquote made it, and they are working on a very different level. You know, they're academics, they write books, they write articles, they publish, right?
Yeah.
And then there are the ones who are in the same field of work, but they are just kind of, well, let me put it this way, rely on their like sitting on their laurels, right?
Yeah.
Who haven't really done anything since 20 years, since I don't know 19 or since the 2000s, when they
Right.
got into the profession, to improve their standing in the community, right? And
Mm.
I think there aren't really that many who are in the middle, right? There are people who really go all out, and then there are
Yeah.
people who are like, okay, yeah, you know, I'm comfortable. And
Mm.
I think this is a very strange phenomenon in our particular field of work. Um, there's no like people who are like middle management in companies who who kind of do something but not go
Yeah.
crazy. Either for us, it's either wow, you either go like you're doing your doctorate, I have a doctorate, and I'm still doing a second master's in English language assessment at Cambridge. Like
Mm-hmm.
people are like, Jason, what are you doing? You know, why are you not stopping?
Yeah.
You are okay. I said, well, no, because I want to keep improving, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's very interesting. What you pointed out in the conversation is that there seems to be a very clear divide between the two groups.
Yeah. And I mean, this divide exists because you have those in a position of luxury who can, who can go up the career ladder by, further training, professional development. And there are those, I think it's a vicious circle. I think it's a vicious circle. When I look back at myself 20 years ago, I had no money for any kind of qualification,
Mm,
for a certificate
mm,
or a diploma course. I had a degree. I was very lucky that my degree was in English language and linguistics.
mm,
That was just a fluke. But it combined so well. And like I said, like I admitted, I cheated when I went and taught in industry. I sold myself as a native speaker. At the time it was legal. At the time it was legal for companies to stipulate they only wanted a native speaker. And
mm,
I got my work experience. So I think, you need to find your way in the door. You need to get your foot in the door,
mm.
and then not just rest on your laurels. And there are
Yeah.
some who, and I know this is unpopular, and I know it's difficult, but certificate and then diploma qualifications is not it's not enough anymore today. It's not enough today. I remember when I was first hired by a German university, diploma was the highest qualification they asked for. And then
Mm,
after that, I think then I went to England. And luckily, in a way, it was lucky that I went to England because I did my MAT sol there. And when I wanted to come back to Germany, I saw all the job ads were asking for teachers with a postgraduate qualification, with a master's
mm,
in TESOL. So, the employers are raising the bar, and teachers may come with all those personalities, all those,
mm,
that intercultural experience, the I'm a non-native speaker, so I know what it's like if you're learning a new language, and look at me and you can be like me. But it's it's a lot to do with upskilling, professional development, and really you got to move up and up, up and up and further up. You can't. I mean, I cannot
Yeah, I mean, like
imagine.
I understand what you said. You know, it is difficult for a lot of people. I mean, I also went through the whole freelance thing and short-term contracts. And what you mentioned in the previous show, how you only get paid at the end of the semester at the university, and you only get to do like 9 SWS per semester,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
I went through all that, but I also sacrifice to make sure that I am able to do all these other certifications and degrees so that I'm not stuck in that position forever, right?
yeah,
So I think it is, I mean, I don't want to say, hey, look at me, like, look how great I am, right?
yeah,
But what I would like to do is more, project positivity is like if I could do it, I don't see why anybody, I mean, I don't consider myself better than anybody. So I think everybody could do it. And I mean, yes, there is injustice and inequality in the field of work that we're in, but I don't think it's necessarily a deal breaker, right?
mm,
So, and we have so much to offer
yeah,
in addition to the language,
yeah,
right? So, yeah. Yeah. Um,
yeah. I think. I mean, that's quite. That's actually a really fitting end to
yeah.
today's show because, like you say, it's not a deal breaker, and I think also what's important is that it's not. I just need. I think I need to say it's not the industry that's broken because as unpopular as it might sound, the industry is fine because you see people from all backgrounds, from all walks of life who've gone
Mm,
into English language teaching and who've made it and who've found, as something a friend said to me a few years ago. She asked me, what wows you about language teaching? So I know many people who found that wow, that sweet spot, what they like, what they love about what they
mm,
do, no matter in what context that they work in. The only how would I say, the only cancer, I suppose, in our industry is the unregulated
mm-hmm.
private
Yeah.
language teaching settings.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the
Yeah.
cancer, and that contributes to this perpetuation, to this discussion of, oh, let's say that's a conversation for a different day. But it's this little cancer that perpetuates this image that non-native
Yeah. That
English
we are
speaking
not
teachers,
professionals, you know?
yeah, being sidelined, and that they need to be advocated for. And
Mm,
I think, in a global world, I think people are not stupid. And
no.
coming back to actually the title of today's show, teaching English, people know, I don't have, corporate clients saying, oh, I need to speak this and this English, and therefore I want, you know, a teacher, a native English speaking teacher. I don't have that,
Mm-mm.
you
Yeah.
know.
Nobody
Um,
cares, really. I've never really came across that.
yeah.
Yeah.
But before I finish, I
Yeah.
want to I want to share an anecdote. So when I first started teaching, my one of my first biggest contracts to teach English to middle managers at Daimler Chrysler. They were Daimler Chrysler at the time, so
Mm,
Mercedes now, right? And as I shared with you, I was working with Berlitz, so I had the whole Berlitz textbook, which served me fine. I never taught before, so that was perfect. I didn't know anything about
mm,
lesson planning. You go in, you follow the script, and there were words and phrases in there. There was lexical items that was very American. And when I was teaching, and my students saying, "Oh, but that is there another way to say it?" As I think we had the phrase like, "Let's take a rain check" or something. And then
mm,
we started talking about the material and the variety of English that they were being made to teach them. And my students actually said to me, Well, we're going to be dealing with people in the Middle East, so I want to speak an English that they understand,
Mm.
you know. And on
Yeah,
that note,
free of
yeah,
sports
exa-
phrases.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So on that note,
At AQA, we work with the UK's largest teacher network to shape the future of assessment. With teachers for students, we ask questions today that matter tomorrow.
The 7,500 primary schools are already using Kapow Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to kapowprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles.
and you have been listening to the morning break. We will be back in 2 weeks. If you have a story to tell or a topic to discuss, anything to do with teachers, teaching, or learning, you can find us on social media. Just drop us a line. And that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, Jason, for joining us for very interesting conversation. And I hope to carry on the conversation with you some other time
All right.
on some
Thank
other
you.
medium. But until then, Jason, get better soon.
Thank you. Bye.
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 You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.